Before I begin, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories like this. What happened to me still feels unreal, even now, even after everything crashed and burned exactly the way it had to. My wife never told me she wanted a baby with me. Not once in 6 years of marriage. She barely talked about kids at all. But one Wednesday night, sitting across from me at a quiet restaurant, she told me, calmly, politely, that she had decided to carry her ex-boyfriend's baby, and she said it like she was describing a charity project she'd signed up for at work. We were sitting at a booth near the window, soft lights, clinking silverware. She didn't even look nervous. She twirled her fork in her pasta, took a sip of wine, and said she'd already talked to them, already met with the clinic, already done everything except tell me. I didn't shout. I didn't stand up. I didn't ask why she thought this was remotely acceptable. I just sat there and asked questions the way an accountant asks about missing numbers in a spreadsheet. The more she talked, the more obvious the truth became. This wasn't a sudden impulse. She'd been reconnecting with him for a while. She said they ran into each other. But her voice had that practiced casualness she used when she didn't want me to look deeper. And when I asked why she didn't talk to me first, she called me insecure, jealous, controlling. It didn't even sting. It just clarified something I'd ignored for too long. She no longer saw me as her husband. She saw me as an obstacle she needed to manage. I nodded like I was considering her words, but inside everything clicked into place. I wasn't going to argue with a person who had already decided what my role was in her new plan. I wasn't going to beg her to remember the life we built together. I wasn't going to sit there and play the part of the clueless husband who just doesn't understand. I told her I needed some air, paid the bill, and drove away without going home. My brother opened his door before I knocked twice. I must have looked like someone who'd seen a ghost. He didn't ask anything at first, just handed me a beer, and we sat in his garage with the cold air drifting in. When I finally told him, he stared at me like he wasn't sure I was joking. Then he got angry on my behalf, the kind of anger I'd never let myself feel. But I wasn't angry. I was awake. Something in me had shifted. I'd spent years being the guy who solved problems quietly, who avoided conflict, who forgave too easily. That night I realized that being the nice guy only works when the person you love isn't using your kindness as a shield. While she was making life-changing decisions behind my back, I was still believing we were a team. I stayed on my brother's couch. My phone buzzed so many times I eventually silenced it. Every message from her said the same thing in different words. Let's talk, you're overreacting, I didn't do anything wrong. But there was one message that told me everything. The transfer is scheduled soon. I need you to be supportive. Not, we need to discuss this. Not, I'm sorry. She was already treating her choice like it was law. By morning, I had a plan. Before the sun was fully up, I was on my laptop reading legal articles, scanning state laws, searching for the name of the toughest divorce firm in the city. I knew her well enough to predict the next steps. She'd keep pushing forward, assuming I'd eventually cave. She didn't know that I was finally done playing the role she'd assigned me. At 8 sharp, I walked into the downtown office of a divorce attorney known for being ruthless, the kind of person you hire when you're done giving people chances. I told her everything. She listened quietly, tapping her pen against her notebook, and then she leaned back and said a single sentence that felt like a door closing behind me. You've been replaced emotionally. Now we protect you financially. She drew up the paperwork in minutes. She laid out the steps. She explained exactly what I was allowed to freeze, what I was allowed to cancel, and how fast everything would move once she filed. Her confidence made something in my chest loosen for the first time since the restaurant. By noon, the divorce was filed. By early afternoon, the accounts that held my father's inheritance, money I'd stupidly kept joint, were frozen. By 3, she was off my insurance. And by evening, I finally turned my phone back on, knowing exactly what I'd find. Missed calls, long messages, accusations, pleading, claims that I was being cruel. And then one final message from her. I can't believe you're doing this. I thought you loved me. I did. But love stops being love when the other person treats you like a placeholder. I looked at the message, then at the ceiling in my brother's dark living room, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt calm. Not happy. Not victorious. Just calm. Like a man who finally stepped out of a burning house and realized he didn't owe anyone an explanation for saving himself. The next morning, I woke up to gray light leaking through the blinds in my brother's spare room and the smell of coffee drifting down the hallway. For a moment, before everything rushed back into place, I felt the quiet comfort of a normal day. Then I remembered who I was now. Not a husband. Not really. More like someone standing in the doorway between two lives, waiting for the final push. My brother slid a mug toward me when I walked into the kitchen. He didn't ask questions. That's the thing about brothers. They know when silence is the only thing holding you together. The silence didn't last long. My phone buzzed with the first call at 9. Then another. And another. I didn't answer until the fourth, and only because it wasn't her name, it was a number I didn't recognize. A man introduced himself, a steady professional voice. He said he represented my wife. He said she was overwhelmed. He said she was distraught. Then he said what he really called to say. She needed access to the accounts I had frozen. She needed money to pay rent, buy food, cover medical bills. Medical bills that would come from a procedure she chose without me. I told him no. No discussion, no compromise, no temporary relief. If she needed money, she could ask the man who benefited most from her decision. He didn't like that answer. He lectured me about compassion, about responsibility, about what a husband owes his wife. And I listened quietly because arguing with a man paid to sound righteous is pointless. When he ran out of breath, I repeated myself. The accounts stay frozen until the court says otherwise. Then I hung up. My brother raised an eyebrow. You good? I'm fine, I said. But that wasn't exactly true. I didn't enjoy hurting her. I didn't enjoy imagining her struggling. I just couldn't forget the look on her face at that restaurant. The certainty that her life decisions were hers alone and mine didn't matter. If she didn't want a partner, she shouldn't have expected the privileges that come with having one. She didn't give me time to sit with the guilt. Less than an hour later, she showed up at my brother's house. I saw her through the window before she even knocked. Standing on the porch with her arms crossed, her jaw tight, her expression somewhere between outrage and desperation. When my brother opened the door, she didn't wait to be invited in. She stepped forward, as if the house were still hers, as if I were still hers. "Why are you doing this?" she said. No greeting, no apology, just the question she thought would break me. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took in the details. She looked tired. Not physically. She always kept herself meticulously put together, but emotionally tired. Her eyes were red, her breathing uneven. She'd never been good at hiding stress. "I'm not doing anything," I finally said. "You made a decision. I'm responding to it." "Responding? You froze our accounts. You took away my insurance. You blindsided me with divorce papers at work. Who does that? Someone you didn't consult before deciding to get pregnant for another man." She flinched, and for a split second I thought maybe she finally understood how insane her choice was. But then she did what she always did when she felt cornered. She shifted the blame. "I was trying to help people. They trusted me. And you're making me look like a terrible person. You did that on your own. This isn't fair. Neither is offering your body to your ex without telling your husband." She went silent, not because she agreed, but because she didn't have anywhere left to steer the conversation. She wasn't used to me staying calm. She only knew how to win when she could get me emotional. When that didn't work, she tried something else. "The transfer is happening this week," she said quietly. "If I don't go through with it, we all lose the money we've already paid." "Then lose it." "You don't understand," she said, her voice straining. "This is important. This is a gift." "A gift for who?" I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. She stormed out a few seconds later, leaving the door half open behind her. My brother closed it gently, like he was sealing the air out. "She's not thinking straight," he said. "She hasn't been for a while." I nodded. He was right, but it didn't matter. I couldn't save her from the consequences of her own choices, and I wasn't going to try. The transfer happened 2 days later. I didn't hear it from her. I heard it from a mutual acquaintance who still worked near her clinic. And then, 3 hours later, she texted me, "It's done. I hope you're happy." I wasn't happy, but I wasn't sad either. I felt like someone watching a train disappear into the distance, knowing it wasn't coming back, knowing he'd been standing on the wrong platform for years. A week passed. Then too, I went back to work. I kept my head down. My attorney filed motion after motion to tighten the legal boundaries around me and keep her from exploiting the remaining assets. Her lawyer filed his own, begging for temporary support, access to the accounts, anything to shift the balance in her favor. The judge refused all of it. She ruled that everything stays frozen until court. And that's when my wife's life began to unravel faster than I had predicted. With no access to the accounts, she couldn't afford her half of the rent. She couldn't pay for the follow-up appointments. She couldn't even cover her car payment. And while I didn't enjoy hearing about her struggles, I didn't intervene. She had chosen her path. She had chosen her company. And, apparently, her living situation, because not long after, word spread that she had moved in with her ex and his wife. Even saying their names together felt wrong. 3 adults trying to salvage an arrangement built on secrets none of them fully understood. I could have felt jealousy. I could have felt anger. Instead, I felt the strange, steady calm of someone who finally sees the truth clearly. She wasn't mine anymore. She hadn't been for a long time. The only thing left now was the courtroom, and I had no idea then how much more she was hiding. How deep the betrayal really went, or how it would be exposed by someone I never expected. The day of the settlement hearing arrived on a cold morning that felt more like winter than fall. I sat outside the courthouse in my car, watching people rush across the street with their scarves pulled tight and their heads down. Everyone looked like they were fighting their own private battles. Mine was waiting behind a pair of heavy oak doors upstairs. When I finally walked into the hallway, my attorney was already there, reviewing her notes with the calm focus of someone preparing for surgery rather than divorce court. She greeted me with a firm nod, the same way she had on the first day. Steady, unshaken, a reminder that I wasn't going into this alone. My wife arrived 10 minutes later. She looked different from the woman who once spent 2 hours getting ready for dinner dates. The pregnancy had softened her features and added a weight beneath her eyes. She moved slower. Her confidence wasn't gone, but it was cracked in places. And for the first time in months, she didn't look angry or defensive. She looked scared. Her attorney guided her toward us but kept distance, like we were all radioactive. When the judge entered the hearing room, the air shifted. Judge Pierce was a woman in her 60s with the kind of presence that could silence an entire auditorium. She didn't waste time. She scanned the file, adjusted her glasses, and said, "This is a mess." That was her opening line. Then she looked at my wife. "You chose to become a surrogate without consulting your husband. That demonstrates a serious disregard for marital partnership." My wife swallowed hard. Her attorney tried to defend her, saying she had good intentions, that she wasn't trying to hurt anyone. The judge cut him off with a hand. "Intentions are irrelevant when actions have consequences." Then she turned to me. "Mr. Foster, you froze your wife's access to marital funds while she was preparing for a medical procedure. Regardless of whose child it is, that was vindictive. I accepted that without protest. I had no reason to pretend otherwise." The judge continued, explaining what would happen next. My inheritance would be ruled separate property. The remaining marital assets would be split. The marriage would be dissolved immediately. It should have ended there. Clean split. Cold closure. But before the judge could finalize the ruling, the courtroom doors opened and someone walked in. Someone I didn't expect to see again. It was Melissa, the ex's wife. She wasn't supposed to be part of this hearing. She wasn't invited. But she came with a folder in her hands and a look on her face that made every attorney in the room straighten in their chairs. Melissa apologized to the judge for interrupting. She said she had information directly relevant to the integrity of the case. The judge agreed to hear her. My wife shifted uncomfortably, her face draining of color. Melissa approached the bench and placed the folder gently on the table. I didn't know what was inside, but the tension in the room thickened. When the judge opened it, her expression changed. She didn't react dramatically, just a tightening around her eyes, a slow exhale, a harder set to her mouth. "Mrs. Foster," the judge said, "please stand." My wife stood shakily. "Do you have any explanation?" The judge continued. "For these records?" My wife didn't answer. She didn't even look at the folder. Melissa spoke instead. She explained what she had discovered 2 weeks earlier. Text messages, clinic forms, and appointment logs showing that the embryo being transferred wasn't Melissa's. It wasn't Melissa's egg. It wasn't Melissa's genetic child at all. It was my wife's egg, fertilized with her ex's sperm. The room went silent. Not courtroom silent, but deeper. The kind of silence where the air seems to contract. My wife's attorney tried to interject, but the judge silenced him with a stare so sharp he sank back into his chair. Melissa continued explaining how she found out, how she confronted the clinic, how she confronted her husband, how the truth unraveled like a pulled thread until the entire fabric of their supposed surrogacy plan fell apart. My wife didn't deny any of it. She didn't defend herself. She stood there, shaking, with both hands on her stomach as if she needed to physically hold herself up. The judge finally leaned back, folded her hands, and said, "Mrs. Foster, you did not act as a surrogate. You attempted to deceive both your husband and another couple under the guise of surrogacy. You concealed an ongoing relationship with your former partner. You participated in a reproductive arrangement that misrepresented genetic material. And you attempted to justify this deception as altruism." Her voice was steady, but it carried an edge sharp enough to cut the table in half. "Your actions reflect not only marital betrayal," she added, "but a profound lack of honesty. This court cannot overlook that." My wife began crying, quietly, not dramatically. Tears gathered under her eyes and fell one by one onto the front of her dress. Whether it was guilt, fear, or humiliation, I couldn't tell. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel pity. I just felt distance. Like I was watching someone I used to know, someone who didn't exist anymore. The judge finalized the settlement in accordance with the new information. She reiterated that my inheritance would remain mine, untouched. She granted my wife only her minimal share. She added a written note to the ruling documenting my wife's deceptive behavior. And then she dissolved the marriage with one strike of her pen. Melissa left the room without looking at either of us. My wife sat down slowly, shaking so much her chair touched the table behind her. Her attorney whispered something, but she didn't respond. I walked out without speaking to her. It wasn't cruelty. There was simply nothing left to say. The marriage wasn't just over. It had been dead long before today, buried under secrets I hadn't known existed. In the weeks that followed, Melissa filed a lawsuit against both my ex-wife and her ex-husband. Fraud, emotional distress, and breach of contract. The story spread through local news like wildfire. People love scandals about betrayal. They devour them like gossip at a neighborhood barbecue. My ex-wife became a headline, then a talking point, then a cautionary tale. Her ex lost his job. She lost hers. Every search result attached her name to the scandal. They moved into a small apartment outside the city. They struggled financially, trying to support a newborn and pay the judgment the court placed on them. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt something closer to closure. The kind that comes slowly, like the tide withdrawing after a storm. Months later, I moved into a new apartment downtown. Clean, quiet, mine. I started dating again, cautiously, like someone relearning how to trust the ground beneath him. A year passed, then two. One rainy evening, while I was waiting for my coffee at a small cafe, I heard a familiar voice behind me. I turned and saw her, my ex-wife. She looked smaller, thinner. Her hair was shorter, streaked with gray she didn't try to hide. Her clothes looked worn. She pushed a stroller with one hand and clutched a diaper bag in the other. She froze when she saw me. For a moment, I thought she might turn around and leave. But she didn't. She ordered her drink, then walked over to me as if pulled by something heavier than pride. She asked if she could sit. I shrugged, neutral, not unkind. She sat and told me about the baby, a girl, healthy, bright. She told me about the lawsuit, the debt, the jobs she couldn't keep, the friends she lost. She apologized, quietly, without excuses, without the defensive edge she used to wield like armor. I asked her one question: was any of it real? She looked down at her hands and said that she had loved me once, but she had loved the past with her ex more. She said she'd told herself she could have both. She was wrong. When she left, pushing the stroller out into the rain, I felt no anger, no bitterness, just relief. Not because she was suffering, not because I won, but because I had escaped the version of my life she had almost dragged me into. Outside, the streetlights flickered against the wet pavement. I took a deep breath, walked to my car, and headed to dinner with someone new. Someone kind, someone honest, someone who reminded me every day that peace isn't something you stumble into, it's something you choose to protect. And as I drove away, I realized the real victory wasn't her downfall or the judge's words or the headlines. The real victory was this: I had my life back, my time, my sanity, my future, and she had her choices. At the end of the day, that was the fairest outcome of all. Thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story.